Today, we're talking about a global icon who, at the absolute height of her fame, made a choice that just shocked the world. I mean, she had everything: fame, beauty, influence, and then, right at the peak of her power, she just walked away. And we're going to figure out why.
So yeah, that's the big question when it comes to Brigitte Bardot's life, isn't it? She was a French actress, a singer, a fashion icon, honestly, one of the most famous women on the entire planet. And then, at the absolute top of her game, she just vanished from public life. What on earth could make someone walk away from all of that? That's how old she was when she retired. 39. It was 1973. She'd starred in 47 films and had been a worldwide phenomenon for over a decade. And she just quit. For most stars, 39 is when you're just getting started on the next chapter of your career. But for Bardot, it was the end.
Her own explanation? She said it was a way to get out elegantly. Sounds simple, right? But the story behind that decision is anything but. To really get what made this move so huge, we have to go all the way back to the beginning and see how the legend of Bibi was created in the first place. Okay, so before she became this massive global star, Brigitte Bardot was a product of a world she was about to turn completely upside down. You see, she wasn't born an icon. She was shaped by a very specific time and place, a place she was ultimately going to rebel against. So picture this. She's born into the Parisian upper class, into a family that was all about strict conservative values. I mean, she had to use formal pronouns just to talk to her own parents. That kind of rigid world, well, it created this deep-seated need to rebel. She first found an escape in ballet, and then in modeling, landing her very first cover for Elle magazine when she was just 15. That was the spark. And to really understand her impact, you have to remember what Hollywood was like in the 1950s. It was all about manufactured perfection. Perfect hair, glamorous gowns, every star's image was tightly controlled by the studio. Bardot was the exact opposite. She was messy, natural, and just radiated this sensuality that felt completely real. She wasn't playing a part, she was the part. And overnight, messy hair and gingham dresses were the coolest things you could wear.
And then, boom. 1956 happens. This raw energy just explodes onto the world stage with the movie And God Created Woman, which was directed by her first husband, Roger Vadim. The film totally scandalized audiences with its story of a young, totally free-spirited teenager. It was a massive international hit, and it gave her the nickname that would define her for a generation, the Sex Kitten.
But here's the thing, her impact went so much deeper than just being a pinup. The famous French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir saw something revolutionary in her. She called Bardot a locomotive of women's history. Why? Because Bardot just refused to play by the patriarchal rules of the time. She lived her life openly, she did what she wanted, she earned her own money, and she never, ever apologized for it. In post-war France, that wasn't just sexy, it was a radical act of freedom.
Right, so by the time we get to the early 1960s, she isn't just a movie star anymore. She's become a full-on cultural force, an export as valuable as anything else made in France. She was, simply put, a phenomenon. I mean, just think about that for a second. The president of France, Charles de Gaulle himself, said she was as important to the nation's economy as a giant car company. That is the kind of influence we were talking about. Her image, her style, her whole vibe. It was part of France's identity on the world stage. And of course, the movies just kept coming. She worked with some of the greatest directors of the era, like Jean-Luc Godard in Contempt, a classic of the French New Wave, which was this movement that just broke all the traditional rules of filmmaking. She also proved she was way more than a pretty face, getting serious critical acclaim for her dramatic work in a film called The Truth.
But honestly, her influence stretched way beyond the movie theater. People called it the Bibi effect, and it was everywhere. She almost single-handedly made the bikini a mainstream thing. That off-the-shoulder look, we still call it the Bardot neckline. She's the reason Saint-Tropez went from a sleepy fishing village to a playground for the rich and famous. Oh, and on top of all that, she was a singer with a whole successful music career, a true icon in every sense of the word. Which brings us all the way back to that first question. Why on earth would you leave all of this behind? The stardom, the fashion, the music, the adoration. Well, the answer wasn't a bigger movie or a better record deal. It was something else entirely. It was a new calling. You see, she didn't just retire, she completely reinvented her life's mission. In 1973, she walked away from the camera and poured all that fame and energy into something new: animal rights. She auctioned off her own personal belongings to raise money, and by 1986, she'd established the Brigitte Bardot Foundation, making it her life's work.
And let me tell you, she was incredibly effective. She used her global platform to become this fierce and, yeah, often controversial advocate. She famously took on the hunting of baby seals in Canada, she became a huge opponent of eating horse meat, and she funded programs to help stray animals. She wasn't just lending her name, she was really on the front lines.
So, this second act of her life absolutely cemented her place in public memory. But it also started to reveal a much, much more complicated and controversial person. The free-spirited icon from the 60s slowly gave way to a deeply polarizing public figure. Her legacy is, well, it's a huge contradiction. On one hand, you have the liberator, the symbol of sexual freedom, the enduring fashion icon. And then on the other hand, you have the provocateur, a vocal supporter of the far right in France, who has been fined for inciting racial hatred and who called the women of the #MeToo movement hypocritical. Her public comments, especially those aimed at France's Muslim population, have led to her being convicted by French courts, not just once, but multiple times. This has created this massive divide in how people see her, a huge gap between the beloved icon of the 60s and the inflammatory figure she became in her later years. In the end, Brigitte Bardot is still, without a doubt, one of the most influential cultural figures of the 20th century. Her story really forces us to wrestle with a tough question. How do we remember our icons when their legacies are just as challenging and controversial as they are celebrated? There's really no easy answer to that one.